It contains nudity and occasional coarse language.
It's the Jim Conway Show!
Jim Conway's name is like God, and it's because of Jim. It's him, it's what he gives with that harmonica.
I think Jim's playing is better now than, say, it was a decade ago. And I think it's better because of the adversity that he's gone through.
You don't say, whoopee, this person's got an incurable disease, let's get married. I mean, maybe, you know.
I'm a serious musician.
Jim knows that blues, basically traditional blues, bores me shitless.
I mean, there's something in there, there's something in his soul that's definitely, you know, a blues musician, yeah, for sure.
Sort of whirling down the street and some people won't look you in the eye at all. They'll sort of look right past you, right through you, rather than acknowledge, because they've been told when they were kids, don't stare at gimps. Then you'll get the other people who overcompensate for that and they smile at you like this and say hello, you know, so that they're not seen to be looking right through you, you know, but I'm just normal. I was diagnosed 13 years ago. I probably went through the classic emotions of a newly diagnosed person with MS. Denial, anger, shock. But I remember when I was first diagnosed and I was still pretty well able-bodied and didn't have any obvious symptoms apart from being a bit clumsy on my feet. I said, well, look, I don't think I've got it very badly, but if I ever end up in a wheelchair, I'll kill myself. But it's funny how things change, because by the time I got a wheelchair, it was an absolute relief. I thought, oh, now I'm mobile again. I don't think I'm going through denial or a lot of those emotions I did when I was newly diagnosed. I am just going through the emotion of getting on with my life, and MS is now part of my life.
Multiple sclerosis is a condition of the central nervous system. People develop symptoms such as visual disturbances, coordination problems, weakness, bladder problems, bowel problems and sexuality problems.
You know, I think for Jim, you know, to have that terrible thing happen to him, to get that terrible disease, that kind of suffering makes him, you know, be sympathetic to other people's suffering and, you know, endows him with a degree of compassion and understanding for the human condition that, you know, such an affliction would allow you to have, which, you know, is a terrible way to have to learn those things, but, you know, it's a real testament to the depth of his humanity. Excuse me a minute.
There is a very strong myth that people have that it's a death sentence, you know, and I remember once at a gig, a couple of fans of Jim turned up quite pissed and sort of sat down and wanted to be deep and meaningful while I was in the audience. And one took hold of my hand and said, how does it feel to see your husband dying in front of you? I was going, or words to that effect. And I said, he doesn't, have a look at him, he doesn't look that sick to me. And this person said, I promise you I will be by the bedside. When you need help and you need to be someone to keep vigil by the bedside, I will be there. And I said, well, you're getting on a bit, we might be by your bedside.
Come here, come this way.
Oh, look! Who's this?
Hello, it's really good to be here today. Hello, Jude. This is for you. This is your tribute.
On my father's side, my grandfather used to compose music for silent movies, and as a child I used to go and see, he used to play the organ at the State Theatre, and as a small girl I remember going to see him and being in the audience. The organ would rise up out of the stage and that would be my grandfather playing away.
Had a kind of vaudeville personality, which I think is where my brother gets his obsession with vaudeville. He composed music for one of the earliest films made in Australia. Well, it was actually made in New Guinea, a film called Pearls and Savages. This is our ancestors.
Yes. Now, this looks like a jug band. I'll just wipe away the dust. There we go. It looks like a jug band. I think they're actually faking it for the camera, but my Jewish grandfather, vaudeville performer, is the only one who's not there on in this photo, but there's his sisters, and they've got a washtub bass there. They've got violins and all kinds of odd instruments, hamming it up for the camera.
So there was no hope.
There we go.
It's in the blood. Well, it's in his blood. My mother was a nurse and my father was a wool buyer. I think my father, having grown up with the insecurity of being a family that relied on music for a living, probably decided to go for something more secure.
All the things I'd done to sort of stop them becoming musicians, etc. There was nothing I could have done to stop them because it was there and it came out. But I didn't realise that Jim was such a gifted person with music. Yeah. And nothing could have stopped him, not even me, I couldn't have stopped him. It just came out there, and his mother helped him to learn the harmonica, is that right?
My mother helped me to learn the violin and my brother cured me of it. Sister's boyfriend at the time, who later became her husband, made tapes of original blues recordings. You know. As soon as I heard it, I was hooked.
Every time I'm walking down the street.
I'd heard Mick Jagger play the harmonica, and I'd heard Roy Orbison's tune Candyman being played, and that had harmonica on it. And I was seduced by the sound. And the aforementioned brother-in-law played a bit of harmonica, and he showed me how to bend a note, and I was away.
It was my idea to get a jug band together, you know, at school. You know, that was the big thing. I'd heard some blues records, including a couple of old jug band things, and I was just totally obsessed. And I didn't play anything, and neither did Jim. So I said, look, you know, you play the harmonica, and I'll play the washboard. and that's what we did. But Jim was like an absolute natural. Within the space of a few days. He was sounding fantastic just listening to a few old blues records.
It was called the Jelly Bean Jug Band, and the Jelly Bean Jug Band won the school talent quiz, and then we started playing the odd gig in a folk club in Melbourne called the Outpost Inn, and we were away.
Well, keep on cooking, mama, cook no lose the way. Keep on cooking, mama, cook no night day. Your best work girl is last down, you boy drum for me, head on down. Keep on cooking, mama, cook no lose the way, yeah.
By the 60s, the harmonica was very, very much associated with blues performers. Now, you could honk away on a harmonica in a jug band, but if you wanted to be serious, you looked at the great blues harmonica players. And I think that's when Jim looked at them, he was just absolutely amazed.
One more time for me.
If you'd ever told me that was going to be my career, I would have laughed. It was not... It still isn't a great career move, but it was not I hadn't seriously considered it as a career.
What had you thought of doing?
I was working in the film industry. I did. I mean, I hadn't thought of anything. I hadn't really made up my mind about anything at that age, but I did go on to work in the film industry as an assistant editor. And I was just about to go on to being a full-time editor as opposed to being an assistant. And we had a hit record. And I was on the road as a musician. The record was called Smoke Dreams, and the hit record off that was My Canary's Got Circles Under Its Eyes.
And what was the group?
The Captain Matchbox Whoopee Band.
I think during the early and mid-60s there was a quite burgeoning jug band tradition in Australia. There were lots of people playing in jug bands, and that eventually folded into an interest in the blues for a lot of those groups. The most successful jug band of all was Captain Matchbox Whoopee Band.
Back in Nagasaki, where the fellas chew tobacco.
It was irreverent. It was irreverent in terms of social attitudes and all of that sort of stuff, and we were kind of kings of the hippies, you know.
What was bad taste in the 70s and the glitter in the disco scene, we just replaced with some more bad taste of our own.
Yeah, but
we've got some of it here.
This is what he made me do. He made me put on this. Him, my famous brother.
I'll put it on your head too. The fruit suit. The famous fruit suit.
This is like...
and of course the hat. We'll get the fruit suit.
Get the fruit suit on first. This is like Carmen Miranda all over. This is only part of it.
Carmen Miranda meets Rolf Harris.
Carmen Miranda meets Rolf Harrison. This is what he made me do. You can see.
You got to admit it's attractive though.
It's a good look. That's what he made me do. We were not serious jazz bows wearing, straw hats and striped shirts and things like that. It was kind of wild. It was never terrifically tight or anything like that, and all the things people think bands should be. It was irreverent, and it was that energy. There was a real incredible raw energy in the Captain Matchbox Band.
They did a couple of encores and then went off, and I was staying at the back, and people were just Matchbox. And I thought, this floor's going to cave in, because it's on the second floor at Balmain Town Hall. And I thought, the plaster's going to come off, and I'm going to lose my $30 deposit if this goes up. I'm going to have to get up there and get them back on. And I got out there, and it was like standing on a beach with these roller coaster waves. I've never ever again felt up in a stage of the entertainment centre and all sorts of big gigs. There was just these waves of sweat, and people there just saying, Matchbox, man. People were fanatical for that band, absolutely fanatical for Captain Matchbox.
Matchbox didn't really attract groupies as such. In fact, I can remember one time where we were staying at the same hotel, motel in Adelaide as Billy Thorpe and the Aztecs. And they had a bunch of girls outside their rooms, and, you know, Thorpe and the boys would sort of open their door and go, you, I'll have you. And they'd walk in, and I remember our drummer going, hey, girls, we're up here. And they go,
They said that we were too young, and in their day it was never done.
Certainly was a lot of fun. I mean, for a 19-year-old to be on the road and being totally irreverent and wildly undisciplined.
Free love, well, look, if he had any free love going, he never offered me any, I'll tell you.
He never paid for it. He used to get his love. He didn't have to pay for his love. He's a lovable guy. We love him.
The 70s was a real wild, free-loving time, but our wild, free-loving was really with friends. I mean, we didn't really have groupies as such, but people who were friends with us, we'd all be jumping into bed together and things like that.
Well, Jim and drugs, nah, he was very well behaved boy.
He never did anything. He never even drank. He used bloody mineral water.
And soybeans and rice curd. You know, it was all a bit of that sort of, that old hippie. Because they were a couple of old hippies, you must admit.
I mean,
Nick and Jim.
If you farted in their general direction, they'd get off on that, you know.
I walked in the Roadhouse restaurant. It had been a long drive. My mind was far away. The lady at the counter asked me, "What do you want?"
When I first heard it, I hated it with a vengeance, and I still don't like it very much, but I have to give it credit for establishing my career. When we first started rehearsing it, I staged a walk out of the rehearsal. I said, I'm not going to play this stuff. I want to play something more serious. But as we all know, it was the beginning of a questionable career.
My wahine in wine, it doesn't matter that we're apart, I still love you.
That cover is Lunig at his very, very best. I mean, the whole idea of somebody, you know, holding up a bridge until some guy comes along with his huge Lunig-like tongue and the thing collapses. I mean, that's a wonderful image.
When we actually had a hit with that record, Wangaratta Wahine, the Sun newspaper in Melbourne organised a photograph session in Wangaratta where we got to meet the mayor and I was dressed as a kangaroo.
The year is 1983. The place is the Hip Hop Club on Oxford Street. The band is Conway Brothers Hiccups Orchestra. Here we go now. Oh, singing in the bathtub, singing along, singing on the bathtub just like a saxophone. Never take a shower, it's a lot of fun. Sitting on the shower like sitting on your bum.
Well, I'd have to say the lineup of the band that I had with my brother, with George Washing Machine and Ian Date in the band and Dave Clayton playing the bass, that was a fantastic lineup.
Oh, I'm forever blowing bubbles, pretty bubbles in the air. Goggle solo.
My brother, with his obsession with vaudeville, always has to have a stage act. So as well as the music having a comic element to it, he was always fire-eating or juggling or tap dancing or standing on his head or telling a joke or something like that. It's real vaudeville when my brother gets up on stage.
Sibling, shake a hand. I go listen to that whole band. It was crazy then. It's crazy still. That's variety, and that's horrible. Yeah.
We were in Scotland, and Jim and I had been travelling on the road together for some months, and I can't remember what it was about, but I threw an ashtray at him and he threw a teapot at me.
Just because he was just driving me up the wall. These things go on in bands.
I think it was because he'd seen me weeing in the shower one morning and he thought it was a bit of a filthy habit, and then I took exception to him telling me that it was in fact filthy, and so I threw an ashtray at him, he threw a teapot at me, but we're still firm friends.
I know he's a dog, but I like him. I like dogs.
I got interviewed by a Scottish compere who, unfortunately, I couldn't understand a word he was saying. I could. And he went, he could, but I couldn't understand. He went, to me it was... So I took a punt and I thought he said, oh, what's your first name? So I said, Mick Conway. And everybody burst into hysterical laughter. And then he asked me something else, which I got wrong as well. And that was the end of the interview. And what he'd actually asked me is this your first time in Britain? But I didn't know that.
He used to love that kazoo.
Oh,
he could play chorus after chorus.
I reckon he should be made to pull it out. What about a kazoo album?
I think that'd be great. I think
what about
should
Jim
call
Conway?
This film should be called Jim Conway,
Kazoo.
A Man and His Kazoo.
The kazoo is a bone of contention and still is. He hates playing kazoo. I forced him to play kazoo. He's actually a great kazoo player. He's got just the voice for it and he can make it sound fantastic, but he hates it.
You know what brothers are like. Sibling rivalry.
They used to argue about what songs was going to get done.
And it was classic because Jim would be kind of, he was a bit more the sort of, the professional musician. And there's Mick, and we're doing things on the stage, and you could always tell the degrees of things going wrong with Mick, because if he put his hand here, you'd know that there was a bit of a worry going on.
That's right.
And then if he put his hand up near his, it was like pretty serious. And once the hand went up, it was a disaster. And that happened quite often. And meanwhile, Jim would be
crying with laughter, crying with laughter at his brother's misfortune. Bloody mean brothers they are.
Mick got a bit tired of George, Ian, and me taking the piss out of him all the time because, but that was, that was the whole balance of the band, and I really liked it. It was funny.
Impersonation of the treasurer, Paul Keating. Paul Keating. This is George washing machine to do his impersonation of Malcolm Fraser. Oh, Jim, you wanted to do your Dawn Fraser impersonation. All right.
We decided in the end that enough was enough, and obviously Jim did too, especially as the dawning of the MS on him. He just thought, it's not funny. MS isn't funny. How can you be funny when you've got that? So, yeah, that was it. Fuck it. Gone. Done.
I got to a stage where I found it harder and harder to do comedy. The more the disability set in, and I was getting depressed about it, and not being able to stand up on stage anymore and pour a glass of water over my head, I thought it was kind of undignified as I became more and more disabled.
I'm just going to the Dendy Cinema to see this film Go Now, which I've been told is about someone who develops MS and his life falls apart, but it's on at the Dendy Cinema. We'll see how we go for access.
Do you want... I can bring the chair up later if you want me to help you.
No, I don't need help.
I'll go for it, I suppose.
Basically, it's the story of my life, but it's not me. everything that happened to me happens to this guy in the movie, even right down to the end where he marries the woman who stood by him and loved him dearly. I'd been giving Helen such a hard time at that stage. Helen had actually gone to Melbourne to see if she could live there, anywhere where I wasn't. But her reaction to me being diagnosed with MS was to come straight back to Sydney and look after me and go through it with me. I didn't tell my family immediately. I didn't know at what rate I would deteriorate. So I thought, well, maybe I won't even deteriorate noticeably in my parents' lifetime, so I don't need to tell them. I guess that's denial. But it became obvious that I'd have to tell them, and I did. And they were, and still are, quite distressed by it, but I guess they admire the fact that I cope with it pretty well.
I remember exactly where I was when he told me that he had MS, and I remember exactly what I was thinking, which was, oh no, he's going to be in a wheelchair. And I could see him in a wheelchair, and it seemed like the most dreadful thing, you know. It was like, I was just devastated.
There you go. There's another 12 to go.
I sort of just wanted to carry on as though that's something that might happen in the future. I think I actually there was a bit of a problem with my actual attitude to it in a lot of ways, even though, I mean, I don't know if Jim suffered from denial as well, but I had a sort of thing where I sort of felt like, well, let's just carry on anyway, but it was a shock, and I was, I think everybody in the family were quite devastated by it.
Because you can't do anything, because as a father who's picked them up and cuddled them and done all those other things, and then he's got something, even though he's been away from home and he's a grown man and made his own life, you can't pick him up and cuddle him. You can't do anything like that. You just got to put up with the fact that he has it and you can't help. You can't do one thing to help. Now, I can nearly cry now because I'm talking about it.
Mm.
That's a fact. No, don't get upset. It's just me. I mean, normally I wouldn't do that, but it is a fact. It makes me feel how frustrating it is for me. So what about him? He had to go through it. He probably comes through it better than I have, I guess. There you are.
Oh, God.
Well, you know what I'm like. I am an emotional person. I come from a long line of emotional people.
We're not emotional.
But it's real.
Laughing about it.
Well, thank God they all are like that. Yeah, I like it. People that can go through things without emotions are not real people. If they, if they take pride in being unaffected, that's not my cup of tea.
Yeah.
After all, if I'm going to be Jewish, gypsy, and all the other things, well, why can't I?
Stairs. I think I could do without the exercise.
Well done.
MS doesn't just happen to the person with MS, it happens to everyone close to that person and their family, but it happens particularly to lovers or wives or spouses, I should say, of people with MS. It affects everyone, and in the good situations, people don't run away from it, and Helen is not the sort of person who would run away from that challenge. She'd be more likely to, and she did, take on the challenge because she cares.
No, when I first saw it, I was sure it was the bits for the wheelchair.
It might be too. In an indirect way, I gave Helen every opportunity to get out of the relationship if she wanted to, and she didn't want to go, and she stayed with me, and I very much appreciate that, because my life would be a lot harder without Helen, and I couldn't ask for a more caring partner.
Right, great. Let's have a look at it. Hey, wow.
Try it on.
Well, that looks good, doesn't it?
Black Opal from Lightning Ridge.
Great, thanks. I didn't really have a Florence Nightingale complex. The idea of being a carer and being seen as a carer wasn't something that really was in my scheme of things, and fortunately that hasn't happened. We've got the sort of relationship that we've wanted, which is extremely equal, and that we've managed to sort of navigate some very tricky waters. So I think we have quite a normal relationship, but I was really nervous about being in a relationship that basically would become unhealthy because of the circumstances, and that's what I didn't want out of life.
Nice cars I can't win no more. But on the horses and they will not show. I'm not going to give up. I'm going to try it again. Keep on betting you.
Who's Brownie McGee? What's he? He wasn't in the band. Was he in the band after I left? Is that who took my job? Probably.
People let it come rain or sunshine. If you keep on trying, you're bound to win sometime.
I had a jam with Brownie in his motel room, and then Sonny Terry died and Brownie came out to Australia on his own to do a solo tour. And I turned up at the basement and went into the dressing room thinking he won't remember me. And he looked at me and he said, "Oh, good. I was wondering when you were going to turn up." And I was immediately asked to get up on stage and play with him.
Let it come rain or sunshine, yeah. If you keep on trying, you may succeed sometime. All right, Jim.
I think that the fact that he would actually even consider playing with Jim is about as high a recognition as anybody can ever get.
We were all listening to Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee, so for me to have my brother playing with Brownie McGee, it's like, whoa.
When he came out the following time, I was booked to do the whole tour with him. It's a gruelling tour. He held up to it much better than I did, I have to say. I was exhausted. I was recently diagnosed with MS and I wasn't telling people, so he didn't know why I was sort of staggering around the place, and he was thinking I was drunk or on drugs or something like that, and eventually explained to him that I had MS and all was forgiven.
If you keep on trying, you may succeed sometime.
Before I needed a walking stick, I was being accused of being drunk, and then when I got the walking stick, I was accused of being pretentious, so you can't win. That's good. Give it another go from the beginning. That was sounding fantastic. I'm very impressed. I started it out over 20 years ago, and it's quite hard teaching the harmonica because you can't see what's going on there. But I think it took at least 5 years, maybe 10 years, before I was what I would consider a good teacher. But I actually think that I'm now the best teacher of the blues harmonica around in Australia, certainly in Sydney, because I've got 20 years' experience at it, and it's a very hard task. It's quite exhausting, and I only ever do it one-to-one. I don't like giving more than one person at a time a lesson, and it's intense. Think about saying ha, 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 ha as you breathe inwards. So, and soft. It's a soft sound. It's not a hard sound. It's not ka, 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 ka. Do it without the harmonica. So, okay, yeah, that's right. But do it. But what's wrong with it is that your throat is tense. You need to relax your throat. Okay. To get that sound. So have another go. Do it. That's much better. Now just get on hole 2 and draw. Okay, that's exactly the right technique, but I want you to take the kind of jagged edges off it, so you get this sound. Smooth the edges. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Sure. Give that a go.
A hard teacher? He can be a bit hard at times.
Yeah, I can be tough. I mean, I'm not always as polite and complimentary to Nick as I may have seemed to be today. I can be hard on the students if I think it'll help. I mean, you know, one of my favourite gags in a lesson is relax or I'll belt you.
He can be extremely critical. I think he's probably the person who's been most critical of me, of any person that I know, in fact. It's a kind of criticism like, I'm telling you because I'm your brother and, you know, I love you, so I'm telling you this thing, and it's like, oh no, I didn't want to hear that. Not at all, you know, yeah.
You can always tell when Jim's displeased, but also that, yeah, he's not known for his tact or his sort of gentleness with words.
Not good. Looks terrific, but it's not good. It's got a spar. Yes, my name's Jim Conway. I'm here for the festival. I was supposed to be booked into a disabled room. This is not a disabled room. I'm on a subcommittee, one of my many subcommittees, that is looking at the accessibility of all council buildings, and they are now taking it very seriously, but it's taken them a long time. I parked in the disabled parking spot at the White Square parking place, and the sprinkler system meant that I can't get my wheelchair off my wheelchair hoist. It's in the way. This is a really serious oversight in terms of disability parking. I was elected to the board of the MS Society as a kind of angry young man some time ago. I think I actually have been responsible for some change in the outlook of the board. I don't think they've ever had anyone quite like me on the board beforehand, and I think it was good for them. Under the maple tree. That's what I am, a facilitator. Apart from being a harmonica player. That's what I do, I facilitate. For no reward other than the satisfaction of seeing people contacting one another, and seeing people achieve the results of that contact. I've started running an annual concert which raises $20,000 each year. All up we've raised $42,000 and it looks like getting bigger than Ben-Hur. It gets bigger and bigger each year.
Doing the MS concerts I've forgotten because it's been about 10 years since I've managed those bands, but there it is, like every 10 minutes Jim's on the phone worrying that someone's been forgotten or overlooked, or so it's a good thing to worry about all the details.
I'm not the angry young man I once was, and I'm not young anymore.
How would you describe yourself now?
Middle-aged, angry, a moderately angry middle-aged man. One of the ways I cope with having a disability is to make light of it. I've got a very black sense of humour, so it sort of rather suits to refer to myself as a gimp. I'm not precious about it. Some people are. And I'm precious about being patronised. I hate being patronised, and I won't accept it. I'll certainly send myself up.
Tell them what you said about me, George. Well, I said when they interviewed Ian and myself on this occasion, marking the Jim Conway This Is Your Life documentary, and I merely commented on the fact that he's had such an extensive career, from the Jamie Redfern of novelty music to the Ironside of the blues world. The blues, mate. Stick it up and with your, what's the name of the band? The
Backsliders.
The Backsliders.
The Back Scratchers, the Backsliders.
What I'll do is I'll take it easy for a while and look after myself, and I'll just go off and join a blues band or something like that.
2, 3, in the early hours, through dark back streets you roam. 2, 3, in search of weakness, you love to hear from behind.
Rex left in late '87, and that's when Jim joined the band.
Yeah, I kind of got a phone call saying, can you fill in for Rex? And I'd never heard of or seen the band or anything like that. And I filled in, I really liked it, and I sort of hoped they'd ask me to fill in for Rex again. And I've been filling in for Rex for 8 years now.
Oh, we've got to tell you he's coming back next week.
What the Backsliders do is they hold true to that acoustic back porch tradition, which is why when you see them on stage, they look like they're on the back porch. Very convenient for Jim to have MS, because he'd be sitting down whether he had it or not.
When we first started, it was pretty delicate, but it got rowdier, I suppose, and evolved into what it is now, which is, I think, a bit more...
Noisy boys.
A bit noisy.
Sort of heavy metal acoustic music.
Yeah.
Long before what started out as being a Sunday afternoon gig really took off, and we were touring all over Australia, doing festivals, doing all the big folk festivals, doing all the things that I'd been doing previously with my brother, but in a band that suited me better at the time, and probably still does. I've been a musician for a long time, but my sight reading skills and my music reading skills are very minimal, actually. Probably why I always have to work with other people when I do film scores, but after having done this course, I think I'll be a bit more independent.
So what you do is take the first note given there and just practice building chords.
I'm leading to learning more about arranging in a more classical sense, I suppose, or jazz sense at the moment. it is an advantage if you want to do more than just play the harmonica.
Ninths. Dominant ninths, yes. Yeah. Well done. Yeah. Why?
Because
they use a major ninth.
The film's about this guy who's kind of stuck in the 60s. He's a harmonica player, sorry to say. And so we've really got to create that kind of 60s sound. I suppose the biggest thing I've done is the film called The Riddle of the Stinson, which was about the true story of a plane crash on the Lamington Plateau in Queensland. I did music with Colin Watson, who's a fine guitar player. That director was Chris Noonan, who directed Babe. One stage he was interested in Colin and me doing the score for Babe, but for various reasons that didn't eventuate. But we should have it.
Because I was writing music for a film and required a harmonica player. It must be nearly 10 years ago. It was a terrible, terrible film called Breaking Loose. It was an action teen surf movie which disappeared without trace. But it did bring Jim and I together. It's interesting how we work, because we work quite differently. Jim basically sits at the end of the keyboard in his wheelchair and bosses me around and says, no, no, more like this, but we always feel the same things. I generally always suggest that Jim solos last because when he solos, the immediate energy, intent, attitude, passion, everything of the music goes like this, goes on to another level, and it just sort of takes off. And I always say it's a brave man or woman who will solo after Jim Conway.
In the 70s, he went to America, and I'm not sure where he was, but he got a job with a name musician, like some female singer in the country scene or anything, and he's doing this job, and it's his first night on the big concert, and he thinks, fantastic, I've made it, isn't this great? And he's standing up there playing away for all his worth, and the first song, the first song's over, he thinks, wow, great, and she turns around to him and says, play considerably less.
We were in Houston in '88, and we wanted to go and see a real juke joint. So we went down to this place, much to the nervousness of our minders, who said, "Don't go in there. It's all black and you might never get out." And Jim was a bit nervous. We were all nervous about it, but we had a Aboriginal friend, Wally, who said, "Oh, you know, you don't come and drink with us down on Gertrude Street. You know, you go in there." And so we went in there, and of course we were the only whiteys there, and the audience hated us. They were all looking at us, and there was a big black fellow coming up telling, you know, as abusing us, but we didn't understand a word he was saying. We thought we were going to die. But the band was great. The band was great. Jim understood. I didn't. The band was fantastic, and we sort of just wanted to hang in there. And some of our friends had already left, the people giving us lifts, so we didn't know how we were going to get back. But Wally, in the meantime, got the owners to get Jim up on stage, saying, "Oh, there's a bloke played with Brownie McGee, you know, and Sonny Terry. He's a great, you know, you should get him up." And the band would look very reluctant about all this, but the owners got him up. And this moment, it was a cutting edge, but it was a great moment because there was a moment where, you know, thought we were going to die, and then within a few bars of Jim playing harmonica, the whole place erupted in joy, and it was just an incredible moment. They just loved it. I cried because it was like a dream come true. It was like we'd always dreamed of going to one of these juke joints.
What I felt like I was bringing it back, saying thank you very much. And
he was.